Let's now complete the developments of our model components, the person class. Okay, so far we have got 3 attributes for the person class, and also we have 1 constructor for creating person instances. Also we have 2 accessor methods for asking questions about any context person objects, right? We got get BMI, and also we got toString methods. So these are the 2 accessor methods. So far we haven't implemented any mechanism for us to change the attribute values, so which will be also very useful. For example, how do we define the behavior where let's say the person have gained weight or lost weight, right? That's also something you got to deal with if you really try to model the real life phenomenon. So the way we do this is by defining another kind of methods. Okay, so now I'm gonna write it here. Okay, so let's have some comments over here. Define mutator methods. Okay, so as opposed to accessor, now we got mutator. Mutator methods which modify the states of the current context objects. So when we say the states, as we explained before, attribute values. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. And now for mutator, the fundamental difference between mutator methods and accessor methods is accessor method will get some return value for the questions, but for the mutator, it is not trying to ask any questions. It will just perform the updates, perform the changes silently, okay, quietly, without any noise, okay, without any return value. Okay, so what we can do is now, so the way to say it does not return anything, just say void. So whenever you see the return value of a method being void, that means it's a mutator method. It's going to change something. Okay, so let's say we have a way to change the weights. Set weights, and then over here, double, and then W. Over here we can say this dot weights is assigned to W. Okay, that's very easy. Okay, again, this means a current context object. And a small exercise for you, I'll put it here. Your exercise, define another mutator method that changes the height. Okay, so hopefully you will find it easy to define this exercise. I'll leave them to you. Okay, let's see how we can use this. Okay, so now what we can do is, now let's do toString. Okay, so now basically we initialized 2 person objects, Jim and Jonathan. Okay, basically P1 and P2. And now let's have something interesting here. Let's say somehow Jim has gained weights and Jonathan has lost weight, and then we want to simulate that in the programming environments, because it might just happen in real life. How do we do that in programming context? And then after we have gained Jim's weight and have lost Jonathan's weight, what should be the resulting BMI? It should be different from before. Agree? Why don't we try? So let's make our test a little bit more interesting, more informative. System.out.println. Over here, I would say Jim has gained 2 kilograms. And then system.out, you know what? Let me say after. Because this print line itself does not change the context object. It does not just put some message for us to understand. After Jim has gained 2 kilograms, and print line. Okay, we can. After Jonathan has lost 2 kilograms. Okay, so now we can predict Jim's BMI should increase, Jonathan's BMI should decrease, right? So now after Jim has gained 2 kilograms, how do we simulate that using program? So now the context object should be P1 for Jim. And now since we want to do something about this object, we can use a dot notation. And then since we just defined the setWeights method, we can just select that and say setWeights. And now what should be the new weights number for Jim's weights? It should be the current weight plus 2. How can we get a current weights for Jim? Again, we want to ask a question about P1 dot weights, okay, plus 2. Okay, I will explain to you in just a moment how you can trace this. And then similarly, we can say, now what about Jonathan? P2 dot set weights. And then P2 dot weights, so he has lost 2 kilograms, so minus 2. Okay, so after these two, so now this one here should change the weights attributes for P1, and this line here should change the weights attribute for P2. And then we're going to print out exactly the same 2 lines. Let's edit and copy. And then let's paste. Okay, so you can see even though we are trying to say the same P1 that's toString, P2 that's toString, and then repeat the same method call over here, would you expect the output to be the same? Given that we already changed the weights, they shouldn't be the same, right? Why don't we try? Okay, so now let's run this, and then we'll verify this on the paper and also on the debugger. Okay, let's try that. Okay, we run that. It's now building. Okay, let's wait a bit. Okay, now let's try to see this. Before Jim has, let's say Jim first. Before Jim has gained the 2 kilograms, his BMI is about 23.37. After gaining the 2 kilograms, it's 23.95. It has increased. That's correct. Before Jonathan lost the 2 kilograms, it's 27.44. After that, it's 26. Something has been decreased. Okay, so it's working. Okay, so now let's see how we can trace this program here, these 2 method calls. Okay, again, let's go back to the paper first, and then we'll see how you can do that on the debugger. Okay, you should know both. Okay, now over here, after these 2 lines over here, we got P1 and P2, and we got these 2 objects, P1, which stores the address of this particular person object for Jim. And after this line over here, the second line here, so we also got P2 storing the address of this particular person object for Jonathan. You should know very well from the previous videos how these visualization come into play. You should know very well. It's very important. Okay, and then we are talking about this particular mutator method, and the relevant attribute is the weights. Okay, set weights, and then we have an attributes. Okay, so now let's try this. So now for the first one, you can see, first of all, you can see both method call here. They are trying to call the same method, set weight and set weight, the same method, which means the same definition for set weight will be applied. Okay. However, the context object is different. So here the context object is P1. Here the context object is P2. It's different, right? So now when I say P1 dot set weight, and here I'm passing some expression over here, which is an addition. Okay, the addition, the right hand side is going to be 2, which is easy. But now the left hand side is going to be another dot notation application, P1 dot weights. Whenever you see dot notation in object-oriented programming in Java, whenever you see dot notation over here, look to see what's the context object. Again, it's P1. So now when you say P1 dot weights, what would that be? So P1 is going to let us to go to this particular object over here, and P1 dot weights is currently 80. Okay, and then 80 plus 2. That means we're going to set the new weights to be 80 plus 2 to be 82. So that means we're going to say P1 dot set weight 82. That means we're going to replace this W over here by 82. And then since the context object is P1, so we're going to replace this by P1. So what do? We say P1 dot weights is assigned to 82. P1 dot weights is assigned to 82. So we change that from 80 to 82. Okay, that's the first method call. What about the second one? Let me use a different color to illustrate. What about just the blue over here? So now for the second one, we are trying to do P2, which is the context object over here, and then we call the same method for the second time. Okay, and then over here we are passing again is an subtraction for the input value. The right hand side again is easy, just number 2. The left hand side over here is P2 dot weights. And it's a dot notation. So let's try to see what the context object is. Which it is P2. Okay, what's P2.weights? Okay, in this case, P2 is over here. P2.weights is 85. Okay, that means this part here is 85. And now 85 minus 2 will give us 83. That means we're going to set the weight to be 83. Okay, that means we're going to call this setWeight method for the second time. Now, 83 is going to instantiate every occurrence of W. So now W is going to be instantiated for the second time into 83. And then every occurrence of this over here is going to be P2. So this will be instantiated by this. And then W here is also instantiated to be 83. So what it will end up being is this beg your pardon. This here of course is P2. That's a context object, right? That's P2. So what will this end up being is P2.weights is assigned to 83. So P2.weight is assigned to 83. So that's how we calculate the P1.getBMI. That's why over here when we say P1.toString and P2.toString, which will in turn call the P1.getBMI and P2.getBMI, and they will use exactly these two updated value over here, 82 versus 83. Okay, so hopefully you see how we trace. You can see the way we trace the execution for constructor, accessor methods, and mutator methods, they are all consistent, the same. The critical thing is you should know what this is, what the current context object is. Okay? And then you should know how to replace the parameter by the input values. Okay? So once you know these, you can it'll be quite easy for you to see what's going on. But it's really important. Okay? Okay, once we're done with this, let's now go back to our program over here, and then I want to do another thing for you. Okay, so now I want to run a debugger to show you exactly what's going to happen. So now let me put the debugger over here. Okay, so that means the execution is going to go from top to bottom, and then it's going to execute this line over here without stopping, and then it's also going to execute this line without stopping, and then it's going to stop right here immediately after this line over here, but right before executing this line. Okay, let's see exactly what's going to happen. Okay, make sure you put a breakpoint, and then we're going to debug. Now you can see this debug button here, and then debug person tester. Okay, click on debug, and then it's going to launch the process. You can be patient, wait a little bit, and then you can see the execution is going to pause. Okay, you can see the check mark over here. That means we have done P1 and P2. You can see exactly over here. Okay. Okay, let me just expand this a little bit. Okay. So now if you expand, you can see under variables, we got P1 and P2 already initialized. Expand P1, expand P2. Now you can see that this list over here corresponds to exactly what we did as the visualization for the paper. So you should know both. Once, as long as you understand what's really done on the paper, it shouldn't be difficult for you to understand what's in the debugger, in the variables. So now Jim 80 and 1.85, and Jonathan 85 and 1.76. Okay, completely consistent with our understanding. So now we're going to do system out print line and the P1.toString. Now we want to see exactly how P1.toString is going to be executed. So now we don't say step over, we say step into. So the difference between, you can see these two buttons over here. Let me explain again. This button here called step over is going to simply execute this line over here without pausing in the middle. Okay, but in this case we do want to say the other one, the other option, which is step into. When we say step into, it's going to step into the definition for toString, and then we'll see exactly how things are going to work. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen first before we verify that on the machine. When we step into the toString method over here, it's going to show you what the context object is, which is P1, and that's Jim. And then everything that we do for the computation is going to be with respect to the attribute value for this particular object over here. Okay, let's try. So now let's step into over here. Okay, step into. So now we are in the toString method in the person class, but we need to know what the context object is. In this case, you can see this is the context object. It has been replaced by P1, right? And then P1 is simply just Jim with 80 and 1.85. Okay, that's consistent with what we did before, right? And then you can simply see that over here, we're just gonna, let's just do a little bit more. So now let's step over here, step over. You can see S over here, initially just empty string. And let's see what's gonna happen. So now, as soon as you say step over, it's going to accumulate S by the name of the current object. What's this name? This name, oh, by the way, there's something very useful you can do here. It's something called watches over here. Okay, you can do whatever expression you would like to check. You can click on plus. You can say this dot name, and then it tells you it is Jim. So that means this dot name will evaluate to Jim. And Jim is going to be concatenated with S, which is empty string. Okay, so now if you say step over, you're gonna see that S is now Jim. Okay, and then S is gonna be concatenated with prime S BMI is, and then you can see we're gradually building up the answer. You can see S right now is Jim's BMI is. We haven't got a BMI value yet. But now you can see that we are pausing at this line over here, but now this is going to make just another method call with the context objects, just the one for Jim. And then if we say step over, it's going to show me exactly what the BMI is. But why don't we try? Okay. Now if you just rather than step over, step into. If you say step into, now we are in the get BMI method. But now what's the context object? If you look at that, the context object is this, and the expanded is again also Jim, right? That's also consistent with what we did on the paper. So again, you should really try to do the exercise on the paper once more, or as many times as you like, and then verify this by the machine using step over and step into. So now, when we say this dot weights, let's try that. When we say this dot weights, it's going to be the weights for Jim currently before he actually gained the weights. Okay, let me just say add over here, this dot weights. Over here, this dot weight. Let me try again. This dot for some reason I couldn't see that, but you can see this dot weights is exactly over here. Okay, that's another way to check. Sometimes the watches doesn't work as expected, but that's okay. You should still try. Okay, most of the time it works. Okay, so now this dot name is Jim, and also this dot weight is 80, and then that means this dot weight is 80 over here, and this dot height over here is simply 1.85. Okay, you should really try to get yourself familiar. Don't be terrified by the sophistication of this debugger. It's a good tool. It will really help you write correct programs. Don't be scared. Okay. Okay. Once we calculate it, we can say step over, and then the BMI has been calculated to be 23 point something, and then we're gonna return it, which means we're gonna print it out. Okay. So now we are back in the get BMI from the toString method. Because remember, the toString actually called the get BMI. Now that we get a BMI, so now we can accumulate this string to say Jim's BMI is that value. Okay, so now we can see that BMI value is actually has been computed. So now let's say step over. Okay, so now we got Jim's BMI. Let's execute this line here. So now we know that BMI is actually, if you move your mouse over this variable here, it also shows you what the value is. It's also very useful. And then you have this string accumulated to be this BMI value. Let's step over again. Okay, you can see Jim's BMI is this number here. Okay, it works as expected. Okay, so now my point is, you really want to see that the way I teach you on the paper is consistent with what's really shown on the machine. But to really understand what's really shown on the machine, you have to understand the paper first. Okay, you should really know both. Okay, now let's step over. Okay, everything else you can just trace by yourself. An exercise for you. Now, when I say p1.setWeights, okay? Let's just do one more before I stop it. Now I want to trace what's going to be the programming effect when I say p1.setWeights, p1.weights plus 2. I can step into it. Okay, step into, and now the current this current context object is Jin, and then I can say this.weight is assigned to W, and W is exactly that 80 that we talked about before, right? Because 82. So W over here is 82. Remember we said before it is 82 over here. Okay, 82, the same as before. And then currently it is 80, but Jim has gained weight. We're gonna set it to be 82. Okay, let's step over this line here. So now it will set the W to be 82, right? The same as the input. Okay, so now let's step over again. Now we are back. So now I'll leave the rest to you. And then if you trace again to see what should be the toString and toString, that'll give you the correct answer. The breakpoint and debugging tool for Android Studio is actually quite robust and very useful. You should really make the most use of it as a programmer. That will really benefit you a lot in the long term. Okay, so now let's recap what we have done so far and what we're gonna do to finish the rest of the tutorial. So what we have done, we finished implementing the model components on which is only a person class, because for the BMI calculator we only need to model a person entities, in which case we use a template called person for all the person objects. So we define 3 attributes, and then we define 1 constructor for creating person objects, and then we have 2 accessor methods for asking questions. So we got get BMI, which will return the BMI value, and we also get the toString method, which will return a string representation for the objects. And then we also got 1 Mutator method here called setWeights. And then you can see that test-driven development has been applied along the way, because every time I didn't wait until the person class is finished to show you the test. Every time once I declare the constructor, 1 Mutator, 1 accessor, I just show you a test. So that's really what you should do. As soon as you finish defining a method, you should start testing it without waiting, okay? Because the sooner you find out what the bugs are, the better, okay? Okay, and that's our tester over here. So now what's really left for the tutorial series will be, remember what we left off about in the last video for the controller components. So in the controller components, let me remind you what it is. If you go to BMI activity over here, we said that if you simply do the computation over here in the controller, it violates the separation of concern principle, because in general, the business logic that you want to implement can be arbitrarily complicated. That's why you really want to separate the computation of the business logic in a model components. That's why we actually talk about how you can define using object orientation, and also define a person class with attributes, constructor, mutator methods, and accessors. Now that we have done all that, so now how can we replace this line by some manipulation lines of the model objects? So that would be the focus for the next video.